Sara Elizabeth Avon was born on January 6, 1975. On July 21, 1981, at 6 years old, she was with her younger sister and other neighborhood friends at the end of Richard Street in Joliet, Illinois. Sara had an argument with another child and then walked across the street away from the group. This was the last time she was seen. She was reported missing by her family at approximately 9 p.m. that evening. Searches for her produced no trace of her whereabouts. Many volunteers searched the area surrounding the Avon home and the street she disappeared from. A quarry was also dragged in search of Sara, but nothing was found. A former neighbor of the Avon family, Ernest Wilson Sr., died in Arkansas in January 1993. After he died, his nephew, Robert Today, went to the police and said Wilson had made a deathbed revelation about Sara's disappearance. Wilson was unable to speak at this point, but he drew a distinctive triangular shape on a piece of paper and put a circle inside the triangle. This drawing stuck out to the family because it resembled the triangular-shaped lot where Wilson had lived in 1981. According to Robert, Wilson's son had allegedly implicated himself and another boy in Sara's death. In 1981, his son was 15 years old and was known to be mentally disturbed. Robert said that when he had a conversation with the nephew, he admitted to sexually molesting Sara on the night she disappeared, but stated that he was upstairs when Sara was killed. Investigators and Robert believe that Wilson found Sara deceased and that he buried Sara's body on his property so that he could protect his son. A witness has backed up the story, saying that in 1981, when he was a teenager, he went outside during the night and saw Wilson digging a deep hole in the yard with a shovel. The hole was chest deep. When the teen asked Wilson why he was digging, Wilson said he was digging a hole to transplant his sunflower plants. However, that made no sense because his plants were flourishing where they were. The teen knew nothing of the disappearance of Sara at the time, so he didn't suspect anything. On another night, the same witness saw Wilson operating his bulldozer, pushing mounds of dirt near Hickory Creek and knocking down trees at the junction of Hickory Creek and Spring Creek. Later, the Wilson family moved their above-ground swimming pool near the location where Wilson had used his bulldozer to pile up dirt. After getting the tip from Robert, police dug up the vacant lot on Miller Avenue where Wilson's house once stood. The search turned up nothing and was called off after a couple days. However, one government official involved with the excavation believed that the area that was being excavated was too small and too shallow for them to be sure Sara's body wasn't buried on the lot. The man who saw Wilson digging was quoted as saying the hole was chest deep and thought authorities were not excavating deep enough during the search. The man even brought this to their attention, but they paid no attention to his statements. Sara's body has never been found. The witness said he now wonders whether Wilson may have moved Sara Avon's body from the initial spot where he saw Wilson digging with a hand shovel in the middle of the night. The witness emphasized that too much time has elapsed for him to say that the digging occurred on the night that Sara Avon went missing. A woman who grew up in the neighborhood believes the authorities back in 1993 misinterpreted a drawing of a triangle provided by Wilson during his apparent deathbed confession. She insists the triangle wasn't a drawing of Wilson's yard. She said the triangle symbolized the island behind the Wilson property where Hickory Creek and Spring Creek come together. In her opinion, Sara Avon's body is likely located in this area of woods. In 2004, police dug underneath an old garage on Noel Road, south of Joliet, hoping to find Sara's remains. They did find some clothing, but they could not find any evidence relating to Sara's case. Sara's sister, Marie, who was 5 years old when her sister disappeared, states that the case remains open and her family is still hopeful. As of today, this case remains unsolved. Mark Allen Miller was born on September 6, 1960, and lived and worked in Rockford, Illinois. He graduated from North High School in 1979 and was a native of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. He was one of 5 brothers and is described as a very social person and a dedicated worker. He worked as a catering captain at the Clock Tower Resort and Conference Center. He was 48 years old when he was last seen on March 12, 2009, when he clocked out at work at 1:21 p.m. Mark had become increasingly uncomfortable with the living situation he had with his roommate at the Windsor Apartments on the corner of Whitman Street and North Main Street. The day of his disappearance, Mark told a friend he was going to ask his roommate of 2 years to move out. Later, he called his friend and said he had gone through with it and it had gone better than expected. Mark's roommate, Manuel Vasquez Rivera, was the last person known to have seen him. Authorities are interested in locating him so that they can find out what, if anything, he knows about Mark's disappearance. A few days after his disappearance, his silver Chrysler New Yorker was found abandoned in the 1900 block of Harlem Boulevard, about a mile from his home. They found no evidence of a struggle at his home or vehicle. A small briefcase containing his important personal documents that Mark kept with him at all times in his vehicle was missing and has not been located. It is said that he kept it away from his roommate Manuel to keep him from accessing his personal information. He enjoyed walking by the Rock River and his car was found near there, but a search of the river turned up no signs of him. As of today, the case remains unsolved. Kierra Michelle Coles was born on September 24, 1992. In 2018, she lived in Chicago, Illinois, and worked as a letter carrier for the Charles Hayes Post Office, and she was also a part-time Lyft driver. That year, she got her own apartment and purchased a new car. She was also about 3 months pregnant with her first child and was very excited about becoming a mother. Kierra and her boyfriend had been together for 5 years. However, he had another partner at the time who he had previously had 3 children with, and she is said to have been pregnant again at the same time as Kierra. He also had another child with a third woman. Kierra had requested off from work on October 2nd and 3rd for personal reasons. She was last seen near 81st and Vernon in the Chatham neighborhood of Chicago on October 2nd, 2018. A local resident's surveillance video showed her leaving her home, but instead of getting into her car, she walked past it, across the street, and out of frame. She was dressed in her postal uniform, but she never arrived at the post office, and she had actually called in sick that day. She has never been heard from again. Throughout that day and the next, her mother, Karen Phillips, kept calling Kierra, but received no answer. As all her calls were going directly to voicemail, she at first thought that her daughter's phone had run out of battery. Her mother became concerned and called Kierra's sister to ask if she'd heard from her. Kierra had not been active on Snapchat or social media, which was unusual. Her sister contacted Kierra's boyfriend, and her mother called the Chicago Police Department and asked them to perform a welfare check. She was not at home, but her car was found parked on the block where she lived, with her purse, cell phone, prenatal vitamins, and lunch bag still inside. There is a lot of speculation regarding the exact day that Kierra disappeared. This is because most news outlets have reported she was last seen on October 2nd, while her mother says she went missing 1 day later on October 3rd. The miscommunication comes from the fact that she was last seen in person on the 2nd, while the surveillance footage found would potentially show her last movements the following day. According to reports, Kierra's boyfriend, his girlfriend, and their children left Illinois shortly after her disappearance. Investigators have not revealed if he's been questioned in connection to the case, and the family has shared that he has not attended any vigils nor kept in contact with them. There is much debate on whether the woman seen in their surveillance video is actually Kierra. Some people believe the clothing she's wearing is a postal service uniform, while others feel it doesn't match what is typically worn by postal workers. There's also a question regarding why Kierra would be wearing her work uniform if she had called in sick that day. A representative with the USPS Inspection Service has publicly shared that the organization does not believe the woman in the footage to be Kierra, as there are other postal workers who live on the same block. In the meantime, her mother Karen Phillips and her father Joseph Cole have been very active in the search for answers. Police stated they had a pretty good idea of what transpired and that they believed Kierra met with foul play. They have multiple persons of interest in her case, but as of today, this case remains unsolved. Jesse Warren Ross was born on February 18, 1987 in Kansas and nicknamed Opie. He was 19 years old and a sophomore communications major at the University of Missouri at Kansas City at the time of his disappearance. On November 18, 2006, he had traveled to Chicago, Illinois to participate in a 4-day college mock United Nations convention with 13 other students. On the last night of the conference on November 21, 2006, Jesse attended a dance hosted by conference organizers and a party in a room where alcohol was served at the Sheraton Tower Hotel. Shortly before 12:30 a.m., he would join a meeting with the mock UN Security Council. He was last seen on surveillance camera leaving the meeting and walking out of the building at the Sheraton Towers Hotel in the 300 block of East North Water Street in Chicago at 2:30 a.m. He never made it back to his hotel room and hasn't been seen or heard from since. He did not appear to be intoxicated when he left. The walk from that hotel to the one he was staying in was only a half a mile apart, well lit and monitored by cameras, but none of the cameras recorded Ross. Investigators initially speculated that Jesse, who had been reportedly drinking, might have fallen into the Chicago River, which runs next to the hotel, although a friend of his who was at the meeting stated Jesse didn't appear too intoxicated. The Chicago River was in the opposite direction of the hotel where he was staying, so that would explain why surveillance cameras didn't record Jesse walking to his hotel. Authorities conducted an extensive search in both hotels and its neighborhood, collected videos, interviewed the hotel staff, and sent divers into the Chicago River, but none brought up any clues. The pedestrian esplanade along the river also had a 4-foot-tall iron security barrier. Ross was well liked at college and was known as a driven, enthusiastic young man. He did an unpaid internship at a Kansas City radio station, 95.7 The Vibe, prior to his disappearance, and was so successful that he was promoted to a paid position. He was a popular personality on the station's Shorty and the Boys morning show, where he was known by his radio name, Opie Cunningham. He was not having any personal problems at the time he went missing, and his loved ones are puzzled by his disappearance. There has been no activity on his cell phone or credit card since he was last seen, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Dalton Alexander Mesarchik was born on April 29, 1995, and lived in Streator, Illinois. On March 26, 2003, 7-year-old Dalton was waiting outside his home for a church van to take him to Bible school at the Church of the Nazarene sometime between 6:15 and 6:45 p.m. His sister saw him on the porch about 6:45 p.m. when she left to go to a friend's house to wait for the same church van. He came back inside the house between 7 and 7:15 p.m. to say that he was still waiting on the van. The church van never arrived because the driver was out of town, and unfortunately the family was not notified. At 7:45 p.m., his sister returned home and asked where he was. Dalton was missing and the police were notified. Canines tracked him from his home to the middle of the street and stopped. The next day, his body was found by a fisherman in the Vermilion River 3 miles from his home. Police also found a hammer that was used in his death. Agents from the Streator Police Department, Livingston County Sheriff's Department, and Illinois State Police interviewed dozens of people and followed up on hundreds of leads to identify the person responsible for Dalton's murder. It was reported that there were 31 registered sex offenders in the immediate area at the time of his abduction. As of today, this case remains unsolved.